here, but just to let everybody know, this is a continuation of a session that started yesterday, which was Direct Consumer 101. And we'll have a third session tomorrow, third and final session tomorrow. What we're going to be concentrating on in this particular session is so really the first session was all about exposure to e-commerce and direct to consumer, and why that is a viable channel for breweries and things to consider as you're considering that channel. What we're going to be talking about today is once you've made that commitment into direct to consumer and e-commerce, it's a huge help to get your beer in packages. So we're going to talk about packaging and fulfillment strategies today for direct to consumer. So the first half of it will really be identification of the considerations that you need to have around packaging. It'll be the cost associated with different formats, and then we'll jump in and talk about the specific fulfillment strategies once your beer is in packaging. So that's what we're going to go through today. Just to reintroduce myself, my name is John Kelly. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Craftpeak. We are an Asheville-based technology company that specializes in working with breweries directly to understand their most pressing business challenges and then developing technologies to address that. We work with about 130 different breweries across the US, the UK, and a few in Australia. And we are joined today with the Chief Solutions Architect of Crafted ERP, Jeremy King. And Jeremy, I will turn it over to you, buddy.
Thanks. Yeah, Crafted ERP is really the premier solution for business management software, specifically ERP within the kind of craft beverage industry. So we specialize in and have three very specialized editions. One in brewery, one in winery, one in distillery. As you can see here, it's just a collection of some of the customers we have across all of those. But we're entirely cloud-based. Really designed to be a one system for everything. So it's a true all-in-one system in terms of all of the production, all of the inventory, all of the planning, all of the accounting, all of the sales, all of the analytics reporting, everything delivered through a mobile-friendly solution. It's really easy to get up and running, really easy to maintain, and will give you complete visibility and that single version of the truth throughout the entire organization.
Yeah. Very good. Well, I think a lot of that data is going to be on display today. Jeremy and team have been working hard to pull a bunch of data here. What we were trying to do, once again, is the idea here is that as we're talking with, having dozens and hundreds of conversations over the last few years with breweries, we find that it's really important to be numbers driven and data driven associated with that. So I think much of this presentation is going to be focused on that data and the true cost associated with these various sales channels. And then, of course, tomorrow, what we're going to do is take a look at the revenue associated with these sales channels. We'll take a look at the true cost of both what it takes to produce and package beer, and then also what it takes to sell in those individual markets. So just to get us kicked off for the session today, though, is we're going to do a quick recap of what we kind of covered yesterday. So if we're going to recap a couple of the major themes from the 101 session, it was really trying to illustrate that there's a dramatic rise happening in e-commerce and direct-to-consumer sales, both kind of in global context as growing trends, but also as a direct response to COVID-19, especially in our market. Once again, this acceleration of global e-commerce and direct-to-consumer and third-party fulfillment trends. These are all things that are kind of evolving rapidly, and also are kind of pointing to some shifts in consumer expectations. So we like to buy things online. We like to have those things delivered to us, and there's a lot of examples in market where things are kind of pointed in that direction that we reviewed yesterday. And then also the case for direct consumer and e-commerce for breweries and beverage companies is that we all went through a pretty traumatic shift as tap rooms were closed down, and a lot of our businesses were heavily dependent on those tap rooms. So what we're really talking about in terms of e-commerce and direct consumer is it's an online sales channel that is durable, diversified, and differentiated, meaning that if tap rooms close, this is a channel that remains open. It is also a way to diversify yourself, diversify kind of your revenue streams and differentiate yourself from the other breweries out there, once again, it's becoming more about how we buy things as opposed to even what we're buying. So it's an opportunity for you as a brand to kind of embrace the direct to consumer experience, and also use that as an ability to make sure you're developing a diversified channel that is an alternative to your tap room, or really to supplement the tap room, and then differentiate yourself through that experience. So that's really what we covered yesterday. And at this point, what we're going to do is transition into the 201 topics today. And once again, Jeremy, I'll turn it over to you and let you kick off kind of the packaging component here.
Perfect. Thanks, John. Yeah, moving to DTC, direct to consumer, I mean, really means that we've got to start moving beer outside of our four walls. So it's definitely a model that we've got to start thinking about different ways that we can package and start moving our beer, different ways of actually selling it, not going face to face. But one of the ways that we had, and it was really effectively taken away from us, was the traditional growler method. A lot of people won't touch growlers. Nobody wants to actually touch anything that's coming in from a customer right now, even if you do have your tasting room open. But that's really something, especially with the reusability and the additional cost that goes into it, that's really been eliminated. So that really leaves us with bottles, cans, and then crowlers. And of those three, to really getting into a direct to consumer, I mean, in order to really make this something that can be profitable, we got to make sure that we can do this, as efficiently as possible. Cans and bottles are going to be kind of the solution for that. Crowlers, they're very manual, take a lot of labor. They don't nearly last as long, which of course puts the reputation of your brewery at stake if you're going to get, if somebody's cracking open a crowler several days later and the beer's gone bad. So that really leaves us with cans and bottles. And when we're talking about something that we potentially want to ship, it really comes down with cans as the logical solution. So to make the case for cans, I mean, why do we really want to be selling these? Number one is, especially if you haven't been doing a whole lot of packaging, the packaging materials take up a tremendous amount of space. Cans can be stacked on top of each other much more efficiently. So effectively, reducing that necessary storage space by half. Everybody knows that they're less weight, which means more of the actual shipment weight's the actual weight of the beer as opposed to the packaging materials, and that's going to come, as you're going to see, especially tomorrow, with the exorbitant shipping costs of any kind of liquid. As much as we can reduce the packaging, the better we're going to be, which is going to lead to our lower overall transport costs. I don't know if anybody has tried taking a bottle of beer camping, but we will find out very quickly that they tend to break a little bit easier than cans. So you got the additional benefit to survivability, not only for taking and just being mobile and portable with it, but if you're going to be sending it through a third party and kind of giving up control of how that's going to be handled, you're going to have a lot more durability and lower breakage with that. And of course, being that it's impervious to light, theoretically the beer should last longer than if you're putting in things in green or clear bottles. So I think that for direct to consumer, really the solution that the industry is going towards is going to be towards canning. It's certainly not to say that you can't do the other ones, but the vast majority of our customers that we're looking at have specifically gone into the direct to consumer space as a result of COVID-19, have definitely moved to cans. But in order to do that, we've got certain infrastructure considerations that we've got to take into account. We've got to have access to a canning line some way, shape, or form. Again, this is outside the traditional crowler, but if we're going to do things kind of en masse, we need to have access to one of these can lines. So there's really three different options, buy, share, or outsource. The buying model is ideal in terms of it's going to be probably your lower overall cost, but you've got to make sure that you've got space. Canning lines do not take up small amounts of space. You've really got to make sure you've got a facility that you can spread out to not only have the storage of all your packaging materials, the ability to move those things around, get things loaded onto the canning line. I mean, if we're talking about more scale, you're talking about depalletizers, conveyors, other things that need to go in there, and all of that is going to take a large initial investment to actually go out and procure this stuff. So those are going to be the big considerations. Although you're going to be able to drive your overall cost per can down, there's a lot more up front, and it's not going to be able to fit for everybody. The second one is share, which is some kind of mobile canning or kind of co-op of somebody who's got a canning line. With that, I mean, it's a great solution. You're going to probably see a little bit higher costs than just straight outsourcing to it, because everybody's kind of covering those. But you got timing issues in terms of scheduling, when people want to be utilizing these things, or if somebody's actually coming in to deliver, a mobile canning unit to be able to do that. And then, of course, there's the higher cost per case, compared to owning your own. Third one is just completely outsourcing it. So taking and having another brewery in your location actually canning it for you. Again, there's tankering costs, there's risk to the beer in terms of moving it, and just all kinds of additional logistics issues in terms of buying your cans, or and having those moved to the other location. All of these things just have additional cost to them and additional complexity. But one of the things that you really got to be thinking about when it comes time to how am I going to get my beer into cans. Some additional ones is just, especially if we're going to be, moving these products. So, assuming we can get it into cans, we need additional space and operations and logistics in order to kind of pick, pack, and ship that. If we're going to go all the way to the shipment part, even if we're doing curbside delivery, we're going to need somebody to go out there and pick and pack, and that's going to take actual time out. Because we need the employees to be able to do it. We need the space to be able to do it. We've got to have the storage space to be able, once we've gone and picked the actual order, in terms of where we can start staging things and getting things packed up. If it's in a delivery bag, or if it's in a box that we're going to use for actual shipment to through one of the different delivery methods, to be able to handle all that. All of the packaging materials that you have now. I mean, this is something that if you hadn't been in direct to consumer, something else you're going to have to discover, like, well, I've got to make sure I can protect my beer. So I've got packing materials. Once all those have been packed, I need all of those staged if I'm going to be sending out via US, PS, FedEx, UPS, etc. Any and all of those things. I mean, we need the ability to have all of these different staging areas, because this is a whole other process that we're taking on. And then finally, to actually ship the stuff, we need some kind of shipping software. So we need to be able to go and theoretically take those orders and make sure that we're getting that information in there. Ideally, we've got something that's going to make sure that we're minimizing shipping costs depending on where it is that we're selling it, to make sure that we're getting the best deal possible. There's all kinds of other considerations. We got to make sure that we're updating the customer then once that actually happens, passing on shipping information to make sure that we're closing the loop on those particular orders. And then there's the whole inventory component. Just selling direct to consumer, if you hadn't been doing it before, I mean, these are all potentially different SKUs if you've never been putting your stuff into cans before. And I need to make sure that I'm communicating with all of my other systems, not only the cost information, but actual inventory information. What do I have available to sell? Nothing's worse than putting something up and, having a bunch of people place orders for something that you don't have the available inventory to actually ship. It's obviously a lost opportunity there in terms of selling them. We could have sold them something else that we did have in stock, but potentially could, give the customer less than the optimal experience as they're interacting, with your brewery online. So dealing into some of the cost considerations, and for this presentation, we went and dug through customer information. So what you're seeing here is really a cleanse kind of average, so that we really can put together a realistic analysis of here. So all of this stuff is based on actual customer usage, certainly labor, overheads, and we tried to come up with some averages with some just cleansed data. So for most of this analysis, you're going to see the assumptions here we listed on every slide, but they're going to be fairly straightforward. So we just assumed a flat cost of beer at $150 a barrel. Assumed a labor rate of $25 per hour. Of course, this is like fully weighted. Other things that would be considered into this is going to be some benefits. There's certainly payroll taxes, other things in that, just trying to get a homogenized rate. Of course, your brewery could be higher or lower, but again, this is kind of a nice blended average. Overhead rate of $49 an hour. So this is taking into consideration facilities expense, depreciation on either a can line or keg line, utilities, other facilities, maintenance, etc. So we tried to roll that in and kind of, again, get this kind of blended rate, for everybody, and then, took a percentage of that we would, and we're using the exact same overhead rate and labor rate for both our canning and our keg lines, so we can get a consistent model and take a look at what those looks like. So specifically for kegging here, we're assuming that the time to package or fill a half barrel keg is 1 minute, and we are doing half barrel kegs in this particular instance, and then the time to package a full barrel, because throughout this entire analysis, we're going to try to bring things to a cost per barrel, just so we can do these comparisons depending on different formats, volumes, etc. But that's going to give us the best way to actually do these comparisons. And so the time to package a full barrel of beer is going to be 2 minutes. So over here on the right, we've got our components, and again, keg is hard here because a lot of people are using lease kegs or MicroStar, some type of thing like that. However, most of the guys that are having just stuff out of their tasting room probably don't have that kind of relationship unless we're actually shipping beer outside of it. So this is just, if we did have our own keg fleet, we assumed a certain dollar amount and a certain number of fills, and so this is kind of the cost per fill, for each one of these, and we're just assuming a flat $5. We've got keg caps, keg collars. The cost of our beer here for a half barrel, $75, with the assumption that $150 is our total price or cost per barrel there. And then we've got labor and overhead associated with this. So based on this whole analysis, our cost per keg here, and again, as you can see, the vast majority of the actual cost here is the cost per beer, but we're at $81.85 per keg, or a cost per barrel, basically doubling that to $163.70. Because we're going to use this in comparison with some of the other methodologies in terms of getting stuff into cans. So, but this is going to serve as our baseline. So moving on to cost considerations for canning. Well, I mean, one of the biggest costs on there is the actual cost of the cans themselves. So there's pre-printed cans, kind of blanks and labels. So, affixing some kind of sticker or label to it, and then doing screen cans. So pre-printed cans are going to be probably your lowest overall cost. The downsides to those is you generally have to be buying these things by the truckloads. Blanks, you're going to have a little bit more flexibility in terms of being able to get them. The costs are going to go up because you're going to have to add on those additional costs for the labels. So we can see a cost from anywhere from about 20 cents per can, and of course you need something to actually be able to affix it. I mean, you certainly could have an individual, but your costs are just going to skyrocket in terms of having an individual, and they're trying to affix those labels, and they're not always going to be straight. And then you're going to have your sleeve cans. I think a lot of the people that are jumping into the DTC have gone to a model like this. I think it gives you a little bit more flexibility. According to CanSource, and thank you guys to the guys at CanSource for supplying some of this information, but their cost per can is going to be anywhere from 25 to 45 cents. That's a sleeve can, and the variations that are really going to be size, between 12 and 16 ounces. The finish, if you're going to go gloss versus matte, how many you're actually buying, on a particular order is what's going to impact all those things. But a little bit more flexibility with working with some of these sleeve can guys. I mean, there's smaller order minimums. And they're just kind of geared to really dealing with some of the smaller size breweries, as opposed to the Balls of the world who really want to focus on the large ones. But these are the kind of 3 different models that we're going to analyze as we jump through this. So first and foremost, we got to look at 12 ounce versus 16 ounce. So the top analysis here, you can see that's a 6-4-16. So 6 4-packs of 16-ounce can case, and this is a not necessarily a 12 liter or 12 times 24 equivalent. This is a can case that is 24 cans of 16-ounce beer. The lower one there is going to be our traditional 4-6-12 pack. So 4 6-packs of 12-ounce beers. Similar assumptions that we're utilizing on this. The cost of our beer, again, has been fixed at $150 per barrel. Same labor rate at 25, same overhead rate at 49. And our time to package here is a half minute. Basically per keg or per case here. And we went through and actually did analysis. And even though we're doing different size cans here, we found from the data that the time to package these is roughly the same. And we think that's really because of the where it comes down is where the can end is actually being affixed. That's really the bottleneck in some of these systems. And even though it might take a little bit longer to fill some of these 16-ounce cans, the fact that we've got a bottleneck a little bit further down there really is, from the data we saw, that's about equal when it comes to actual packaging for 12 or 16 ounce. So we've kind of fixed those in terms of the amounts of time it's taken to do both. But then the time to package a full barrel is going to be slightly different because it's taking the same amount of time to package 16-ounce cans that it is 12. We find that the actual time to package the entire barrel is only 5 minutes on the 16-ounce side, and it's a full 7 minutes on the the 12-ounce side. So with that in consideration, you can see our cost per unit, quantities, etc. here for how we would make a particular case of beer. And what we find is pretty significant. The full dollar per barrel packaged of a 16-ounce case is under 300, and we were over 325 for the 12-ounce. And again, most of that is coming from being able to package more volume in less time. So we're going to have less labor costs associated with one, less overhead costs associated with each one. And this is assuming both of these at about well, one of the cans here for the 12-ounce has been fixed at, we said, 40 cents per, and the larger one, the 16-ounce can, is at 45 cents. So assuming that that's the worst case in terms of the overall thing, analysis here, it's still significantly less, primarily based on that less duration or the same duration to be able to package more beer. So when it comes to this, it's pretty clear that just looking at this apples to apples comparison of breaking everything down on a dollar per barrel, that a 16-ounce can is definitely going to be the way to go if you can do it, into this DTC model. Then looking at the two different types, between a sleeve can and a labeled can. So again, same assumptions. Here, this is all 16 ounce, so we've taken that out. We've assumed that we're going to go 16. But the interesting thing here is really the big difference here is going to be, the actual cost of the can itself. So we've got a 12-ounce, or I should say 12-cent can, so that's a full blank with a label up top. So that's, I really think, the bare minimum in terms of what you can go with to try to be able to do that. So we can see that we're at a $234 cost per barrel packaged on that versus the full 16-ounce sleeved can. And I did the worst case scenario on this one, but you can see that you're upwards of almost $296 dollar per packaged in that particular case. That just shows you here what a variation you can have between the types of can you're using, and that can have a dramatic impact, on your bottom line here. And one of the things, I think is really interesting, especially on the direct-to-consumer model, is, I can definitely see if you're packaging a lot of this stuff that's going to go in through distribution and be sold at retail, you need to have something that stands out, because you're going to have your beer sitting on the shelf right next to somebody else's. So the labeling and the artistry and the imagery on the cans is going to be extremely important. I don't think that same thing is as important on the direct-to-consumer site, because they're buying directly from you. You're only competing against yourself and the other images that you have on your website at that point. So I don't think that especially looking at the different numbers here, I think it would be tough to make the argument to go for the really extravagant looking can here, knowing that it really doesn't matter from a sales point of view. And I don't know if the customer is really going to care all that much when they open up or pick up the actual package curbside of what the actual can looks like. But based on the huge different numbers here, you can see that's a pretty significant cost difference. All right, so in general, I'm just taking some averages here, but the cost of canned beer versus draft beer is going to be 1.6 to 1.8 times more expensive. So on the 16-ounce can, you get a little bit more kind of economies of scale by taking the same amount to package more beer. But on average, it's going to cost you $100 per barrel more in additional cost to get that stuff into cans. So that's the 1.6, or a 62% increase over the cost of keg beer. On the 12-ounce side, again, the same duration, but to package less beer, we see that as a result of that, those costs jump up to $130 of additional cost per barrel, or 1.8, or an 80% increase over the cost of keg beer. So they're quite significant, these additional costs, when you take all of these different things into consideration in terms of what really would be your gross profits, just because your costs are so much expensive just to get it into that sellable format. And so looking at revenue per barrel, and again, these are just based on assumptions here, but if you were to assume on your keg beer, you've got a price per pint that you're selling through your tasting room at $5 a pint, without any kind of loss or spillage, we've got 248 pints per barrel, which is going to give you a revenue about $12.40 per barrel. So we do the same thing over on the can side. Again, we're focusing on 16 ounce for the analysis here. Price per case of this, we assumed $100 per case. Now this certainly can vary per you guys, but this is just for this analysis here. Our cases per barrel, it's going to be 10.33. So that's the number of actual, 6, 4, 12, so 6 4-packs of, or 16 ounce beer. is going to yield 10.33 cases per barrel, and there are therefore revenue per barrel of a little over $1,000. So if we take that and combine that now with the cost information that we did, we can come up with our gross margin by model. So draft, I think this is probably going to be at or maybe slightly lower. I mean, it's going to be a difference, but we'll get in that one tomorrow. But for the most part, it's going to be one of the most profitable ways to actually get your beer out there. So if we had a $12.40 revenue per barrel with our $163.70 cost, we're going to have gross margin of $10.76 or almost 87%, and that's pretty healthy gross margin. Now cans, again, the revenue per barrel can vary greatly on this, but at that $100 per case in terms of selling it online, we're going to get that $10.33. This is a blended cost, at that $265, kind of a middle ground between those two, and more of what we saw overall from our customer base, giving you a gross margin of just under 75%. So you can see the differences there. So, it's still a very healthy gross margin to get this stuff into cans here. And a lot of the overall profitability, we're going to jump into this a lot tomorrow in terms of what's our actual sales cost to actually get that into the marketplace. But as it stands now from this analysis, draft and tasting room, if you can do it and have it open, is going to yield the highest gross margin. And this is one just to show some of the variability here. I think this is hugely important to actually show. So we've got gross margin over there on the left, from 60 to 90% there. And then down there on the bottom, we've got our price per case. So this is the selling price, in direct to consumer for that case. And then we've got three different scenarios. One, we ran this through with a 10-cent can. So just bottom basement, cheapest that we've seen, to be able to see exactly what that looks like. Then we've got the highest one, which is going to be the yellow, and that's going to be a can at the 45 cents, so the really upper limit of that. And then we've got one more in line with kind of what we've seen from our customer base with this 25 cents per can. And so you can kind of see exactly how sales price goes up, how dramatically that actually is impacting the gross profit margin on this, and then what a difference it makes just in terms of having a 15 and a 20-cent jump in the cost of the can, on how dramatic that is for your actual profit margin. So if you look at this at that 100, you can see, it basically is going from an 80% margin to a 70% margin, all based on just the cost of those cans that you're using. So it would be our recommendation, based off all the data that we've seen, is to really try to go as inexpensive as possible when it comes to the actual cans, labels, whatever that might be. Or if you certainly, sleeving is a great option as well, but you can do it, certainly at the lower end of that cost range, and you can see that's right at that 25 cents a can. So just other items to consider. We've made the determination, it's worth it. Some people might just absolutely be forced to if you can't be selling through your tasting room. We understand now what the costs and margins are going to look like, but what are the other things that we got to do to be prepared? Are we going to take returns? If we do take returns, we're going to restock that. If we're not going to restock it, are we going to destroy it? Do we need processes around that? We're going to have to start operating with new vendors, start integrating with, our actual inventory in terms of our packaged good inventory with our website and our DTC software. We might have different allocations in terms of what we're going to be available to sell DTC versus what we want to sell potentially through other channels, and how is that going to work, and are we going to be able to take from one and move to the other, and how all of that those decisions are going to be made. Cans are extremely attractive as we kind of walk through here, but are we going to have availability issues? Are there going to be long lead times to be able to do this? Are we going to be able to sync these things up with our actual beer production schedule to make sure that we don't have beer sitting in a bright tank that we intend to put in cans for weeks or months on end? How are order minimums going to impact all of this? Are we going to have the storage space to be able to do this, or can we do longer term project or purchases and start calling things down? And then there's the whole marketing side, that if you've been selling just through your tasting room, you probably haven't done a lot of the online, type of marketing that's going to stir up online sales. And so that's a whole other concept that we might need to take on here. And then cost of delivery. So again, this is where we're going to dive into detail on tomorrow's presentation, but these are the other things that we got to start being considering. What are the costs of those packing materials, the labor to do that, the other overhead? We need space to do this. I've seen a lot of places shutting down their tasting rooms and turning those into effectively mini warehouses where we're going and staging all of these things. So we're reusing that space, in which case we really haven't lost anything. If we're utilizing delivery, is it our people? So where we're using our labor and overhead, gas, et cetera, or we're using third parties. What are those fees? How do those different models work? If we're actually shipping product, what are the shipping fees? It could be $25 a case in some cases, and that could vary depending on how far you're actually shipping that stuff. But as you'll see tomorrow, that could be roughly 100% of the overall cost of what you are actually shipping out could be actual in the shipping fees. And if we don't have the ability to do it all in-house and we're using a third-party logistics company, what are their fees? How are we going to be able to manage that? If we are having cans stored, what are those storage fees? We can't do this with just a straight POS system. We're going to need additional software. We're going to need something that ties in with shipping and our DTC software. The inability to, or the ability to see the customer's face. So there's just a lot of additional considerations to go over when making this jump in, and hopefully this will provide you some of the details to help you guys with better decision making.
Okay, Jeremy, a lot of good stuff there. I'm taking some notes on our side, but guys, I think that, some of this analysis just shows how quickly those costs can add up, and some of those per can charges really start to come into play as you're considering these things. So I hope having access to some of this information will be helpful, especially as you guys are out there trying to compare gross margin to the things that you're doing. Now, tomorrow we're going to be talking about profit margin, but to finish off this presentation, we're really going to talk about now the 3 fulfillment methods that we see associated with direct to consumer. So guys, really once again, to define the e-commerce and direct to consumer, guys, it's all about finding the beer online, buying it online, and then having it delivered either directly or through third party. And then really from there, and Jeremy, I think you were on the correct slide for the next one, and I'll just jump straight to it. Thank you, sir. So really, I think I wanted to take an opportunity to just talk about maybe the distinction between the Taproom and direct to consumer. I think sometimes we're going so fast with online sales that we're not taking a look back at really kind of maybe just some of the major differences. And I think fulfillment is one of those things that's an absolute difference between what is happening in the Taproom and what's happening online. And what's happening there is, in the Taproom, you are essentially going, and the order, the sale, and the fulfillment all happen together. So you go up to the bar, order a beer, that beer is received or delivered to me, and then I'm paying for that. So in a Taproom environment, all of those processes are really happening together. Now, it's very tough to predict the amount of traffic that you're going to get in your Taproom. Right now, it's even a little bit more challenging, and it's always kind of a reactive goal where the goal is to try to provide a great customer experience. So, the way that we operate a Taproom is to make sure that we're taking care of the customers in front of us, that they're not waiting too long for beer, that the checkout process is enjoyable. So it's very focused around the customer, which makes it very reactive. And reactive processes are very tough to schedule, tough to plan for. And that also makes kind of leads to the fact that these are typically very labor-intensive efforts, and there's less flexibility associated with it because, once again, you are kind of at the demand of the number of customers that you have in front of you. Well, if we compare that to online sales, which are direct-to-consumer and e-commerce, sales and fulfillment are 2 separate processes. The sale is going to go through online. You have made your order, that is now being reserved for you. Now begins the fulfillment process. So those are completely separate processes, which means that you as a brewery or beverage company now have the ability to optimize those processes individually. You no longer have to have them linked together or coupled together like we do in the Taproom. This allows us to be a little bit more proactive in these processes, both in the ways that we're trying to optimize for sales and the way that we're trying to optimize for fulfillment. So this gives us the ability to plan and make sure that we're leveraging the resources effectively, because we know the number of orders, we know the number of beers that are sold. So now we have an idea of the amount of resources it's going to take to fulfill those orders. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so I also want to point out that there are some natural constraints that happen in the tap room. And I think as we're all taking a fresh look at our businesses, I think these are important things to point out and show where maybe a complementary strategy with online sales helps with some of these. But some of the constraints that you have in your tap room are also the limits that you have to selling. And there's lots of times that I show up at breweries and there's lines out the door that are all waiting to either order beer or close out their checks. Well, there's lots of bottlenecks here. So one is the capacity limit that you have for your location. That is obviously enhanced and even further regulations based on COVID-19 and some of the social restrictions there. There's a geographic proximity, which means I have to be at your location when your hours are open for me to participate. And of course, I've got to be there with my wallet to be able to pay for this. We are ordering and we're paying through staff. Now, I know this isn't the case in every place, but I think for the majority of breweries and tap rooms out there, it's still that you're ordering through staff and you're paying through staff. So those are all potential bottlenecks. Now, there's bottlenecks and constraints on the e-commerce and online sales side as well. And Jeremy pointed to a couple of those already, around packaging, the cost of cans. Do we have room for inventory? Do we have room for packaged materials? Like all of those are important considerations. But the tap room also has some of those constraints that we want to make sure we point out. Okay, so Jeremy, next slide, please. Okay, so the three that we're going to talk about, once again, curbside pickup, local delivery, and shipping. And we're just going to go ahead and jump into these individually. Okay, before we talk about any of these, I just want to say the overarching goal of all of these things right now in particular is safety first. So we want to make sure that whatever process that we put in place here, it's going to be safe for your workers and staff. It's going to be safe for the customer. And so we're really talking about experiences that have minimal contact and we want maximum sales with as little contact as possible. The second thing is we want to make sure that it's in alignment with our desired customer experience. If you know what your customers are looking for, if they're looking for delivery options, if they're looking for pickup options, if they're looking for scheduled options, those are important things to know. And I would say that it's important for you to be able to view your options of fulfillment in the context of the customer experience you're trying to create. Good workflows for staff, really important, just to make sure that if you're depending on your staff to fulfill these orders, that we make sure that they've got the right information. And for you as business owners, it's important for you to have the data and insights and feedback related to these strategies so that you can adapt, evolve, and refine the flow. So the first one that we'll talk about here is curbside pickup. And with curbside pickup, this, as we look at the majority of our clients, I think just about all of them that are participating with online sales right now are doing some kind of curbside pickup model. Once again, it starts with an online transaction and then a pickup. And that pickup is usually either a scheduled pickup or it's on demand. Now, the difference between the two is a scheduled pickup would be where, as I'm checking out with the beer, I would have the ability also to schedule a time with that brewery that I would be able to come by and pick up that beer. So it's a way for me to be able to pick something that's going to be convenient for the customer. And it also gives insights to the brewery about what is, when we need to have that order ready so we can plan the resource allocation to fulfill these orders. The on-demand side here is there's a number of breweries that we work with that are just if you want to buy a beer from us, do it and it'll be ready in 15, 20 minutes. So the upside there is that you have more direct access to those beers as if you're walking in the tap room almost. The downside is that can become a little bit more of a reactive process flow for your brewery. So great to be able to meet the demand. It might be a little bit trickier to kind of staff up appropriately and really efficiently for that type of schedule. Other considerations, when do you want people picking things up? Do we want them picking things up when you're, let's assume that you have your tap room open. Tap room's an important part of your business. Do you want people coming in and picking up orders while you have your booming tap room business? If the maximum hours for your tap room are between 5 and 7 on a Friday and Saturday, those are probably not the right hours to consider having your pickup schedule. But if maybe it's 3 to 5 on Friday and those people that are picking up their beers are going to stick around for another beer or buy some additional packaged beer, which happens all the time, about 25 to 30% across our customers, that's the case. So defining the hours that are going to work best for you, your employees, and make sure that you're not cannibalizing any of the business, your primary business. Between 5 and 7, probably your staff is going to be fully allocated to the customers on hand in the tap room. Where this also kind of feeds into that. So, if you do you have a separate location? Is there a separate line? Since these orders have already been paid for in advance, is there a place is there a kiosk that they can go to just to fulfill the orders or pick up the orders? A lot of strategies that our breweries are putting in place right now just to kind of maximize the workflow. So, not only think about when, but think about where and how you're, again, going to be trying to create a great experience for the customers without cannibalizing the taproom business. And then inventory management, you're going to see repeated on all these slides because it's an important one. And as you have these various systems that are talking together and you're participating in multiple sales channels, there's always an allocation that needs to be made for what's available to sell in each of those channels. And then from a reporting standpoint, you're going to want to see kind of the results of that. And there is some management back and forth between the various sales channels for that inventory. Okay, so that's curbside pickup. Next is local delivery. So once again, starts with a purchase online. And then as Jeremy already alluded to, really the delivery these days is being done either by brewery staff. And 7 months ago, it was it was frequently the case where breweries would be converting some of their taproom staff over to delivery drivers. And part of the intent behind that was to be able to keep staff on and going when taprooms are closed. We have seen breweries continue to deliver. We have also seen now more and more breweries that are kind of using a third-party delivery service. So it comes down to deciding, and part of this is based on the regulations. Part of this is maybe based on the relaxation of some of the laws in your area. But do we have the ability to convert taproom staff to delivery drivers? Are they using their own equipment? Are they using company equipment? Do they have to get any special certifications to be delivering alcohol? If you're a third party, I know in North Carolina right now, third-party delivery services that are available to deliver alcohol. The only one I think that we have that will do liquids right now is Postmates. So I know that is a little bit different in other states. So it's also understanding, even from a third-party perspective, if they have the ability to deliver alcohol or not. So availability of those options, regulations will kind of influence that a little bit. And then once again, inventory management. But the additional one here would be route optimization. If you're going to take this on, it probably makes sense that, in order to do this efficiently and effectively to keep those costs down, there's probably some route optimization software or techniques at least that need to kind of come into play. Okay, from there, we get into direct-to-consumer shipping. Shipping is, we alluded to this yesterday. We could do a whole presentation series just on shipping, but we'll go through kind of some of the details here in this one. So direct-to-consumer shipping is, once again, when the purchase is made online. It's then delivered through a third-party delivery carrier, typically UPS in the majority of the US. There's a GLS, which is part of GSO or is acquired by GSO on the West Coast. And FedEx is kind of in between right now. They do have some delivery services through their air freight. And I think that they have kind of committed to getting a ground shipping option for alcohol sometime in the near future, although no updates there yet. And then, so that's what it means for direct-to-consumer shipping. Some of the other things that we need to be aware of when it comes to direct-to-consumer shipping, I think might be on the next slide here. Just to remind everybody what direct-to-consumer shipping looks like for beer and other regulated beverages. So this is a map from SOA Ship Compliance. And what you can see here is the dark blue represents all the states where direct-to-consumer for wine is legal. The red states are where direct-to-consumer is absolutely prohibited for all alcohol. Green allows both, and beer is wine and beer specific. What we're going to see in the beer industry, guys, is that there's 9 states that allow direct-to-consumer retail license to be set up for a brewery, and that's pretty much the legal market at this point. Okay, so how do you get started with direct-to-consumer shipping? This is a question that we get all the time, and this is really where the rubber meets the road. But first of all, it's to determine, the states that you want to go into. First of all, it's, can I develop a direct-to-consumer relationship with that state? Do they allow that? And then second of all, is that a good market for my products? And I think both of those are important considerations before just jumping into any state. You want to have both of those kind of figured out. Next comes the carrier agreement. So you'll need to establish a specific agreement with UPS. The way that it works is you get assigned to a UPS rep. They will set up a separate account number specifically for shipping alcohol. It will prevent you from shipping to places that are dry counties or areas that you can't ship alcohol. And you shouldn't be using that account number to ship anything else. So you would have a separate UPS account number for merch and everything else, and you have one that's dedicated to alcohol. And then you'll get into a rate table negotiation and kind of lock in your rates and associated fees. Fees for shipping alcohol would be like the required adult signature. From there, it's really determining what is the packaging material and how are you going to get your product delivered. And as Jeremy alluded to, there's additional cost and inventory and storage options that come into play here. But then it's really trying to find the right packaging solution for your products. After that, it's really a shipping solution. So, a part of your e-commerce solution may have some shipping components. This might also be a third party that you'd be looking at. So, there's a lot of different shipping solutions out there. And what that allows you to do is make sure that as a transaction goes through your online store, that you have labels that you can put on boxes. There's tracking codes. There's notifications that go out to your customers that allow everybody to kind of make sure that the status of that package. And those typically communicate back with the online store. And then reporting is a really important one. So sales tax is very nuanced. Sales tax is different all over the place. We could live across the street from one another in the same zip code and have vastly different sales tax. So sales tax is an important one. Excise tax is going to be a responsibility if you're going into other states. You're also going to have COLA requirements there. And there's also volume limits for each state that need to be kind of adhered to. So lots that kind of goes on the reporting side, and those are kind of the major categories for reporting. Okay, and I guess we'll wrap it up here pretty quick because I know we're going to be running over. But once again, there's 9 states that allow direct-to-consumer shipping. Other considerations that we need to make, of course, like I mentioned before, is just because it's a direct-to-consumer allowable state, does that mean it's a good beer market for you? There's a lot of strategy that goes into helping breweries think through that. Once again, it's the direct consumer registration with the state. It's then setting up a carrier agreement and negotiating rate tables. It's the boxes and packaging materials that need to be then decided on next, any shipping solutions that are going to help, and then the compliance services for sales tax, COLA, volume limits, and other reporting. Okay, so I think just over the wire here, Jeremy.
Nicely done. We did have a couple questions that came in, and John, I think you're probably the best one to field this one. But do you consider options like Uber Eats to be cost efficient for delivery?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that we're going to dive into that a little bit with some financial analysis tomorrow. And I think that part of this is understanding what the fee structure is associated with the third-party delivery services. And if you look at some of the regulations that are going through in Chicago, Illinois right now with the mayor's decree, you'll see that they are making every third-party delivery system make sure that they've got a complete itemized receipt that shows exactly what you're paying for their service and what you're paying for, the food that you have delivered. So there's clarity there. And I think that's part of the challenge with these third-party delivery services, that they're usually charging the brewery on one side, they're charging the customer on the other. So as that becomes, as there's more transparency there, I think people are going to understand what the true costs are associated with that third-party delivery service. So, and part of this is also consumer demand. Like, am I willing to pay that amount for that service to have things delivered? So in many markets, we see that there are a variety of third-party delivery services that are being used. Whether they're cost effective or not, I think ultimately comes down to the customer experience, and they're having to make the call because they're typically footing the bill for that. But what we're going to do tomorrow is kind of walk through what those typical costs are and say, all right, is that enough, or is that reasonable enough for a consumer to say yes and pull the trigger on that, or is that something that's going to prevent people from buying from us? And I think that's the critical decision for our breweries, is to understand what those numbers are, put themselves in the shoes of the consumer and be like, you know what, I wouldn't pay for that, so we've got to figure out another way to get it there. Or I would pay for that, so let's go with it, and we're not going to use delivery, or we're not going to use our staff to deliver, we're going to use a third party.
And then we had one other question about the average cost for insulated boxes and cold packs, but I hate to tease it, but I think we're going to dive into that specific detail tomorrow.
Yeah, we are. It's a good question and something for consideration. I can tell you, boxes are pretty expensive. Once they get insulated and you're adding cold packs to it, they get a heck of a lot more expensive.
And heavier to ship.
And heavier to ship, correct. Okay. Well, guys, I think we have probably blown through our time here. We appreciate the questions that have come in. If there's any questions that kind of come in after the session here, we'll collect those. And once again, we'll start tomorrow's session with a couple of those. I think these questions already kind of teed up tomorrow's conversation, but just to remind everybody, we're going to be doing our 301 and final session tomorrow at 3 p.m. And what we've done up to this point is really talked about gross margin associated with the production and packaging of beer. What we're going to do now is take a look at the cost associated with selling that beer, marketing that beer, with basically the go-to-market strategy, and get to a real profit margin. So that's what we're going to do in tomorrow's session. And a lot of these costs that are being kind of asked in these questions and that we're describing back are an important part of that conversation tomorrow.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining. We look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow.